one of the things that will always stick with me and remind me of the power of traveling solo, I did a walking holiday in the foothills of the Himalayas. I had my guide who came round with me, who was from one of the villages, and they said, would I like to go to the wedding? And I was like, absolutely. It was incredible. They welcomed me in. They were so friendly, made sure I was completely taken care of. And I think because I was there on my own, sort of took me in as one of their own. Being there on my own, I also had no choice but to fully embrace it and, be with them. That's one that I'll always remember.
Welcome to Solo Travel Unpacked, where we explore the world one solo travel story at a time. I'm your host, Kelly, and I believe that solo travel is a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and connection. Each episode, we'll meet a different solo traveler and hear their insights, experiences, and lessons learned. We'll also take a look at a key solo travel topic to give you the tools and inspiration for your own adventure. It's time to hear from today's guest and unpack another solo travel story. Thinking about solo travel but don't know where to start? FTLO Travel makes it easy. They plan small group trips for solo travelers in their 20s and 30s, so you get to explore incredible destinations without the stress of planning it all yourself. From local experiences to logistics, they've got it covered. Plus, their trips are exclusively for ages 25 to 39, so you're traveling with like-minded people. If that sounds like your kind of adventure, FTLO is giving you $100 off your first trip. Just use the code SOLOTRAVELUNPACKED at checkout on ftlotravel.com. Welcome back to Solo Travel Unpacked, the podcast where we explore the transformative power of solo travel, one solo story at a time. I'm your host, Kelly, and today we're diving into a topic that many solo travelers can relate to: solo travel for introverts. Did you know that introverts make up 30 to 50% of the population, yet solo travel is often portrayed as an extrovert's game? The reality is, introverts can thrive as solo travelers when they find the right balance between social interaction and alone time. Joining me today is Ella, a seasoned solo traveler from the UK. Ella has explored destinations from South America to India, Morocco, and more. As an introvert who also loves meeting new people, Ella has found the perfect balance between solo adventure and group travel. This has allowed her to connect with others while still embracing her need for quiet and personal space. In this episode, we'll unpack how introverts can explore solo travel in a way that feels energizing, not overwhelming. Ella will share insights from her own journeys, including how group trips have helped her to build lasting friendships, strategies for balancing social interaction with much-needed alone time, even if the idea of constant socializing feels daunting. If you've ever wondered how to embrace solo travel as an introvert while still making connections on the road, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Ella, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Your solo travel journey is inspiring, and I love that you found a way to make it work as an introvert. Before we dig into that more, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself outside of travel?
Well, I kind of feel like traveling is the most exciting part about me, to be honest. But so I live in the UK, down in the south of England, near the coast. I work as a director of fundraising and marketing for a large international non-governmental organisation, or charity, as we'd probably say here in the UK. Yeah, and I'm a very outdoorsy person. I love being near the beach, being on the beach, being in water is a bit of a passion of mine. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Amazing. Well, like I said, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. And fortunately, we have actually met each other on a solo group trip. So,
We have.
of course, I had to have you on because I just have adored getting to know you. So we'll just hop right in then. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to start solo traveling specifically as an introvert?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I was at university and graduating, loads of people were like doing gap years and going traveling, and I just had absolutely no interest. It really didn't appeal to me. And then after I'd been working for about 10, well, probably about 8 years after I'd graduated, I started feeling like I wanted a break from work and I wanted to do something, and started to think about traveling, but just totally wrote it off as not for me. And a very, very good friend of mine had been travelling herself and had done something called overlanding, which is effectively group travel, but a particular type. And she talked to me about it and told me how amazing it was. And it just inspired me. And I realised that there were different ways to go travelling. I
Mhm.
didn't have to do it the way that everyone else was doing. I could do it in a way that suited me. So that's what I did. So I took 6 months off and went travelling, went overlanding around South America, and then a little bit of carrying on around Colombia with a friend I met on that trip. Then had a short break staying with my sister in Dubai before moving on to India and Nepal for a bit more overlanding. And the friend who'd inspired me came and joined me for a couple of weeks, which was fantastic.
That is absolutely amazing. So is overlanding the company that you used?
No, it's a type of travel. So the company I
Okay.
used is called Dragoman. They stopped existing during COVID, but they are back now. And what it is they have like a big truck. It's like an old truck that's been converted into a bus, but it's very much a big four-wheel drive type truck. And you go around, there's normally sort of 15 to 20 people in the group, but the truck has tents on it, a full camping kitchen, everything you could need. So it's a mixture of you stay sometimes in hostels, sometimes in hotels, and sometimes you camp. But the sort of the advantage of it is you can really get off the beaten track and go sort of all over the place. And they do some really long trips, but they're in
Yeah.
sort of legs of a few weeks at a time. So when I was in South America, I did 3 legs back to back. So starting in Argentina, then down through Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador is where we finished. And so there was sort of a core group that was the same all the way through, but every 3 weeks, a few people would leave and a few people would join. Some people just came for sort of 2 or 3 weeks. Some people were there doing a full sort of 3 month trip. But yeah, it's a brilliant way to travel. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's very cool. Honestly, I don't think I've ever heard of overlanding. I'm gonna have to dig more into that.
It's definitely roughing it a bit more
Yeah.
than some of the other group trips, but it's very cool.
Well, which is an interesting point too, because I know something that people, a big topic that people search around solo travel is the cost. And there's so many different varieties ways you can go to be more budget friendly. So overlanding is something you can look into if you want to do a little bit more rustic. And it sounds like, Ella, before you took this trip, your friend might have helped with some of these details and to give you some support there. But what were some of your biggest concerns or fears before taking this first solo trip? And how did they compare to the actual experience once you got going?
I think I was terrified of going on my own. I really was. So I joined the trip in Buenos Aires, so somewhere like I'd never been anywhere like that before. Long flight to arrive on your own and then sort of just turn up at a hotel. But for me, it was also joining the group. I was really,
Mm-hmm.
really worried about that, particularly as an introvert. It's quite daunting, the idea of walking into a group. But I have to say, when I got off the plane, I have a really vivid memory of being in the taxi on the way to the hotel and just going, I'm here. My goodness, this is the
Yeah.
most exciting thing I've ever done. And from that moment on, it was fine. And I met the group that night, I think, or actually I bumped into a couple of people from the group when I arrived at the hotel, and they were just so friendly and so welcoming that, yeah, from that moment on, never looked back.
Yeah, I think you make such a good point. It's really kind of taking that first step. I know on the way to my first solo trip where I met you, on the way to the airport, I thought, oh my gosh, if one person says the wrong thing, I might have this Uber turn around and take me back. But it was once I got there and really, just landed in that city and really was just on the way. It was just my fear turned into excitement.
Yeah.
So it
And
was really,
and you've certainly never looked back
no,
because you've done
yeah.
so many trips since. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think it's really just working through that first moment of uncertainty with anything really in life, right? And then you say, okay, it's going to be okay. And it really, not only was it okay, it ended up being great. And I know like we met on a group solo trip and so was this one. So you started to touch on this a little bit, but as you know, many introverts enjoy their alone time, but also want those meaningful connections. So you talked about it a little bit, meeting people when you first got there, but how do you approach meeting people when traveling solo?
It's something that I do find really hard. For me, one of the best ways of doing it is something organised. So whether that's a
Hmm.
whole group trip or if it's a trip where you're not joining a group, you're doing it solo, finding sort of an organised activity that you can
Yeah.
join, because then for me, it's about almost like having not rules exactly, but having a role and having a purpose for
Hmm.
being there rather than just sort of walking up to people randomly.
Hmm.
But one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given which was actually when I was going to university, was if you're walking into a room or up to a group of people and you need to introduce yourself, just stand back, look for the person who looks the nicest and walk straight up to them and say hello. And it's such a good piece of advice. I do have to remind myself of that quite often when I'm going into those situations, but it works, particularly I think when you're traveling, whether you're joining a group or you're in a place on your own, there's an instant something in common with other
Mm-hmm.
people there, with other travelers. You've all chosen to be there. You've chosen this place, you've chosen this group or this hotel or this activity. So you've got something in common straight away, and that does make it a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that piece of advice too. And I think that's a good one to offer. And a lot of times, like you said, you've all signed up to be here. We think, you hope. Nobody was forced there. So that gives you immediately something to talk about, something to approach. And honestly, some people might be feeling the exact same way. So when you get into these situations, Ella, do you have any strategies or any kind of boundaries for your own personal space that you kind of have in the back of your head so you can take those steps back if you need to without feeling drained?
Absolutely. I think the number one thing I'd say about when you're traveling solo, again, whether you've joined a group or you're traveling on your own, is you're only answering to yourself whilst you're there.
Mm-hmm.
It's I find it really liberating. I love traveling with my friends, but if you're traveling with friends, it's about what you all want to do, and somebody else wants to go here, so you go there. When you're traveling on your own, you don't owe anything to anybody else. You'll probably make some great friends along the way and want to spend time with them and want to do things with them, but you don't have to. And there's a real sort of understanding, I think, actually, amongst people who are traveling of that. The other thing that I find helps me is having activities that I really enjoy doing, that I'm honest about enjoying doing. So I love
Mm-hmm.
swimming. You might remember this from our trip, Kelly. Any opportunity to get in the water and I'm off. But what that meant was on that trip and on other trips I've done is almost having like an excuse to go and do something. Like everybody
Mm-hmm.
knew very early on, oh, there's water, Ella will be off. And it meant that when we were sort of in hotels or whatever, I could be like, oh, I'm going to go for a swim now. And sometimes that's just a nice way to get a bit of space because everybody
Mm-hmm.
understands that's your thing and that's what you're going to go
Mm-hmm.
and do.
Yeah, I love it. Gives you an outlet. And I remember too, it's funny, I referenced this in another conversation with somebody else another guest that I had on the podcast, and I referenced what you just said because I remember being on one of our bus rides with you and you spoke about just that, about when you're on a trip with family or friends. Obviously there's an awareness of what everybody has to do. And, sometimes you lean into what somebody else wants to do and vice versa. So when you're on these solo trips and you have these moments of downtime, it is liberating because you can do exactly what you want to do. And, there's some, uniqueness about that. And I think that's an aspect that maybe goes unnoticed, or maybe some people, I didn't realize that until you pointed it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a great point. And it really takes that pressure off. And you spoke to swimming. Yes, I remember we went on our little boat ride and Ella was like, I'm getting in the water. I don't care how cold it is.
Well, and you were going to join me, Kelly,
I
but
was.
you
I chickened
didn't in
out.
the end.
I chickened out. Now you look back and I was like, I should have just got in the water. But is there anything else, Ella? Swimming is a great one. Is there anything else when you're in these cities, because you've gone to so many different places, that you kind of have a go-to? I know some people love to go to a grocery store, a local grocery store. Is there anything else besides swimming that gives you that outlet to kind of have that moment to yourself? So if you've ever wondered how to meet people while traveling solo, this might be for you. Traveling solo is amazing, but let's be honest, it can also feel a little overwhelming. Planning, logistics, wondering if you'll actually meet people, it's a lot. That's where FTLO Travel comes in. They organize small group trips for solo travelers in their 20s and 30s so you can explore places like Japan, Morocco, or Brazil with a built-in crew of like-minded adventurers. You get the freedom to do your own thing, but you're never completely on your own. And to sweeten the deal, FTLO is offering $100 off your first trip. Just use code Solo Travel Unpacked at checkout on ftlotravel.com. Sounds like a pretty great way to ease into solo travel, right? All right, back to the conversation.
So I'm also a vegan, and so I enjoy going and finding like nice vegan food, and that's something that again, it's sort of it's a useful
Hmm.
tool, if you like, because everybody understands that I'm a vegan, and I would never want other people to sort of feel they had to come with me. So I'll take myself off and go and find somewhere nice to eat, which is actually, it's quite a pleasure anyway, because it's always nice to, on these sort of trips, sometimes there's something I find myself compromising a bit on is food,
Hmm.
and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But then once in a while, to take yourself off and feel like you can just go where you want to go, and that's a really nice way to do it. The other thing that I've done in a couple of places that I've really enjoyed is self-guided walking tours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's brilliant now. You can get apps where you just download like the walking tour and you put a headphone in and you can just walk around and do it by yourself, but sort of still learning, still feeling like you're seeing the best of the city. But if you want some time by yourself, it's actually a very nice way of doing it. What I would say is there are other times where I've intentionally joined walking tours when I'm on trips as a way of getting to meet people and having a bit of time with other people rather than just being on my own. So that's one that I think can work both ways because there's so much available in that space.
Yeah, you can wait and see the flexibility of how you're feeling that day, whether you need
Exactly.
to recharge on your own or go out and meet some other people. So
Exactly.
again, there solo travel is really growing so much. So, is there any advice that you would give to an introvert who likes the idea of solo travel but is really feeling overwhelmed by the idea of constant social interaction? I know we've spoken to finding those outlets on your own, but is there anything else that you've learned that you could share?
I think I would recommend looking at the different ways you can do it. There's so much availability out there, whether it is group tours or going on your own somewhere. And there are short trips as well. You can choose
Hmm.
to go on a trip that's just a few days, and maybe that's a good way to try it and see how you feel. For some people, it's probably also a good way to do it permanently. A few days of being with a group and interacting, and then that's it. You all sort of leave. And the other one that actually worked really well for me was cycling trips. So I've done a couple of
Mm.
cycling trips, quite tough physically. But the nice thing about going on a cycling trip is you're with a group, but a lot of the time you're on the bike, you're on your own. So it's thinking about those different options, I think, and what appeals to you personally. But there are different types of trip that maybe there's a bit more time to yourself, there's a bit more
Hmm.
free space where you can go off and do things by yourself. So if you're sort of feeling like it might be a bit overwhelming, that would be my advice. The other thing I would say though is I am definitely an introvert, but I recognise that I'm not the deepest of introverts. So maybe this is just for me. But actually, if you're travelling, if you're in a group, it's so lovely to be with people because the people you meet tend to be the kind of people that you're going to get on really well with. And
Hmm.
travelling, the unique thing about travelling and going on trips is you form bonds really quickly. You know, we were together for a week on our trip, and I genuinely feel like I made friends for life
Absolutely.
in that one week. You'd never achieve that in normal life. It might feel overwhelming, but actually there's something about it which I find the easiest and most refreshing way to make connections and meet people is in those sort of short, concentrated trips.
Yeah, and I think too, everybody comes in with that little bit of vulnerability. You're all in this together, but maybe you're more open to having those conversations. And to your point, it's typically like-minded people, right? So you're
Exactly.
approaching people, yeah, that are in it for the same thing, might be feeling a little bit of the hesitations that you felt. But I think too, I remember when we got back from our Portugal trip and I thought, gosh, I have never felt more myself in the longest time than I had on that trip because I wasn't worried about any
Absolutely.
judgments, right? Like, oh, are they going to I'm just like, no, I can just be me. I can be exactly who I am. So there's really that opportunity to just open up.
And chances are you will meet people who you get on really well with and hopefully make friends for life. But also, after a week or whatever it is, you'll all go home. And if you didn't
Mm-hmm.
get on with the group, then you never have to see them or
Yeah.
speak to them again. And that's quite
Yeah.
liberating, I think, when you're there, is kind of knowing, as you say, no one knows me. I can be
Mm-hmm.
myself. There's no judgment here. And if it doesn't work, then I go home in a week and go back to my normal life.
Yeah. You have your memories and you just go on. Yeah, that's a
Exactly.
really good point too. You don't have to make best friends with everybody and that's okay. You can just go on and no pressure to keep in touch. But You've touched on a few of the different types of solo travel that you've done, which are a variety of accommodations. So I'm curious, are there any specific accommodations or travel styles that you found to be more introvert friendly? I know you spoke a little bit about the biking, which is such a great point that you kind of do have those moments to yourselves, but are there any others you'd recommend?
I think depending on what you're doing and where you're going, I'm a big fan of self-catering accommodation if you're doing a trip by yourself, because
Hmm.
it gives you the freedom as an introvert. But I think it's not just unique to introverts. One of the big things about traveling on your own is eating on your own. It's actually really
Hmm.
quite daunting walking into a restaurant on your
Hmm.
own and sitting down to have a meal. If you've got a kitchen in the place you're staying, a small, a means to cook for yourself, then it means it relieves the pressure. You can choose to go
Hmm.
out for something to eat if you want to, or you can
Yeah.
choose to just pop to the grocery store, supermarket, get yourself some pasta and cook it at home. So that's something I've done a lot when I'm traveling solo, not in a group, is I will always try and find somewhere that I've got the ability to cook and eat at home if I want to.
Yeah, that's such a good piece of advice. I think I'm finding these little things that you're pointing out that I'm like, gosh, I didn't even notice that, or that's so helpful for my next trip. So I love that because it is daunting, right, to walk into a restaurant and maybe it's just trying it at home before you even travel.
Yeah.
I find sitting at a bar to be take off a little bit of the pressure, right? Because sometimes there's other people sitting there alone, not opposed to a table, but that bar, makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, at least to sit at a bar. You can
Mm.
have a little conversation with the bartender, and I find sometimes two people at the bar maybe a little more friendly. You can make small talk if that's what you want, or you can just have your own moment there as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a good idea, like trying it at home first. And
Mm.
the thing I find personally is, and I don't know why, but it seems more comfortable to do it at lunchtime than evening. So sometimes if I'm traveling and I do want to eat out, I'll choose to go out for lunch and have
Hmm.
like a main meal at lunchtime. And then I don't need to do it in the evening. I don't know why that is. It just feels like there's a more sort of casual, relaxed atmosphere
Hmm.
quite often in places at lunchtime. But then it is as well, it's about picking the place. So I've done it before, like I'll do a lot of research and actually maybe look for places where they have bar seating. So you can go and sit
Hmm.
there, or places where you can see that they have like lots of sort of small tables where you can be tucked away. Or even I did one where I intentionally went somewhere where it was one big table. So you were sort of sitting on the end, but then there were people all
Yeah.
around you. So you could interact, but equally you didn't feel like here I am sat on my own with everybody staring at me.
Yeah. So many options. So
Yeah,
many
exactly.
options.
And I think for me, that's one of the things as an introvert and a planner, I'll
Mm.
research these things beforehand, and then it means I know I've got options when I get there.
Yeah. So you have done so many solo trips of different varieties. How has your solo travel helped you grow as an introvert?
The biggest thing is giving me, I suppose, the confidence in who I am, the confidence around not just meeting people, but getting on with people and being with people and socializing. You said earlier about when, what you've found is you can be yourself.
Hmm.
And I definitely find that I can be myself and actually quite like who I am when I'm traveling. When you strip away all the kind of stress of work and day to day, and you're just there enjoying things, doing the things you want to do, it's so freeing, and
Hmm.
you can actually enjoy who you are and the things that you want to do. Yeah, in a way that I I don't think there's space for in everyday life.
Hmm. I would fully agree with you. I know when I came back from my first trip and even the ones after, I've said to people, I know it might feel a bit cheesy, but it has truly changed my life. It just opens up and doors that weren't there before and it's really freeing.
It is. And I think it's freeing in who you are, but it's also, once you embrace the idea of solo travel, it's really freeing in the sense that you can choose where to go, when to go,
Hmm.
how much you want to spend. It really opens up the world for you to go and explore. If you're only ever traveling with friends or family, then managing diaries and I
Hmm.
was talking to a friend of mine who's organising a trip with a group of friends at the moment, and actually the stress that it causes of trying to agree a budget and where you're going to go and the dates and all of those things can be quite difficult. Once you embrace solo travel, you realise that you can go anywhere in the world more or less whenever you want and do whatever you
Yeah.
want, and that's just a fantastic thing.
Sometimes all the planning can take the fun out of it and makes it more stressful than it feels like it's worth.
Definitely.
So curious, you've shared so much great advice, but any final words of encouragement for introverts who might be hesitant about solo travel?
I would say if you're hesitant about it, then maybe just try something comfortable first. Maybe,
Hmm.
whether it's a short trip or picking a local destination, just
Hmm.
going away for a weekend to a city a couple of hours away, maybe, so that you can try it, you can see how it feels, you can see what works for you. And then maybe it's that opens the door for you and you have the confidence to go on and do something a bit more adventurous if that's what you're interested in doing.
I love that you said that, Ella, because so many of these episodes we talk about these big trips all over the world, and I love them and they're so exciting and wonderful. But they don't have to be a trip to
No,
another country. Like you said, they can be in your hometown, they can be the next town over. Start small.
absolutely. Yeah, I did one. I went for 2 nights and stayed in a shepherd's hut on a camping site, half an hour away, and it was lovely. I had an
Yeah.
amazing time. It was just a break and gave me a
Yeah.
chance to sort of do things differently and see things differently and meet some people there.
I love that piece of advice. And again, yes, there are places that'll take you all over the world, but you don't have to leave your backyard, to just get started. So, with all your solo travel and trips that you've taken, is there any story or trip or moment that's challenged you, surprised you, or any unforgettable experiences from your solo travels that you want to share?
Yeah, one of the things that will always stick with me and remind me of the power of traveling solo. I did a walking holiday in the foothills of the Himalayas where it was an amazing sort of community initiative. So I was there, I had a guide, and you walked between 5 different villages that are only accessible by foot. And they've all got a single guest house where they can put up a few people. And I think a lot of people do it in couples or in small groups, but I went on my own and that was absolutely fine. So I had my guide who came round with me, who was from one of the villages. And in the first village we got to, which was his village, somebody was getting married later that week. And they said, would I like to go to the wedding? And I was like, absolutely. So they rearranged the itinerary so that we'd do the villages in a different order and be back in this village for the
Amazing.
wedding. And it was incredible. They welcomed me in. They were so friendly, made sure I was completely taken care of. But this was a massive wedding. It wasn't about me. I wasn't the centre of attention at all. And I think because I was there on my own, they just sort of took me in as one of their own. And I got to see this incredible experience of a traditional wedding in this community as if I was one of the community rather than a tourist sort of looking from the outside. And being there on my own, I also had no choice but to fully embrace it and,
Hmm.
be with them. There was no one else for me to sit with or talk to. So you throw yourself into it in a way that you wouldn't if you were there with a group of friends. So yeah, that's one that I'll always remember.
What a special story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really
Thank you.
cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you for making me think about all of these things because it's
Yeah,
a great opportunity to remember all the wonderful experiences I've had.
so much to share. Well, thank you, Ella, for answering all of our questions. And then we will end today's episode like we do with every solo Travel Unpacked episode with the same three final questions. So, first one up, the advice I'd give to someone considering solo travel is.
The advice I'd give to someone considering solo travel is to explore all the different ways that you can do it, all the different options there might be, not just locations, but different styles of travel, different lengths of travel. And then go with your instinct. Whatever appeals to you most is probably going to be the one that's right for you.
My favorite part about solo travel is.
My favourite part about solo travel is the freedom it gives you. You're there for yourself and yourself alone. You can do whatever you want. You can spend time with other people. You can join in the activities if you want to, but you can also just spend some time on your own, exploring or enjoying whatever activities are on offer by yourself.
Something I learned about myself during solo travel is
Something I learned about myself during solo travel is who I really am. When you strip away all of the pressure and stress and busyness of life, what I really enjoy doing, who I enjoy being with, and yeah, just who I am as a person, which is an incredible thing to learn.
that's beautiful, Ella.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ella, so much for coming on today and talking about solo travel as an introvert. I think we could have you back for like 20 more topics that you could hit on. This you have been absolutely wonderful, and I hope those introverts who are listening and thinking about solo travel, can heed some of your advice and take those first steps because you are an amazing reflection of someone who's done it so successfully.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's been a real joy catching up with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Every episode brings a new perspective, so be sure to subscribe and join us next time to meet another incredible solo traveler. If you love this episode, let's keep the conversation going. Follow us on Instagram at Solo Travel Unpacked Pod or on Facebook at Solo Travel Unpacked. And if you have a solo travel story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to be a guest. Until next time, let's explore the world one solo travel story at a time. If today's episode has you seriously considering that solo trip, FTLO Travel is an amazing way to get started. And if you're not sure where to go, their team can help you find the perfect fit. Head to ftlotravel.com. And don't forget, use code SOLOTRAVELUNPACKED at checkout to get $100 off your first trip. Safe travels.